And now, your daily dose of debate, breaking news, and uncensored views. This is the Michael Medved Show.
And another great day in this greatest nation on God's green earth. A great day for President Trump concluding his 3-day visit to China after a nearly 3-hour closing meeting with the Chinese leader Xi Jinping at the Zhangmanhai leadership compound. The visit ended without formal deals with Beijing, but Trump told Fox that Xi had agreed to stop sending military equipment to Iran, and the two leaders agreed very significantly that the Strait of Hormuz needed to be reopened. A White House official told Politico on Thursday that Xi agreed that Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. Now, this is the White House talking. I hope that they're telling the truth, because that, again, would be a very positive development. But there's all kinds of dispute today about things that the White House has said before about the level of damage to the war capabilities in Iran, where apparently the damage to Iranian military resources has not been nearly as devastating, nearly as destructive, nearly as effective from an American point of view as the way it has been portrayed. We will get to that, and it becomes a question of what source do you trust? And do you trust Pete Hegseth and the Pentagon, or do you trust some international sources of news? And I know for a lot of people it's an obvious question. Of course you trust the Pentagon. But there's a collection of information and reports that makes that a little bit more dubious. We will get to that. The official said, an unidentified White House official, and it could be anybody. It could be Stephen Miller, who apparently came along on this trip. And which White House official said that the Chinese agreed that Iran can never have a nuclear weapon? We don't know yet. The official said Xi expressed interest in buying more oil from the United States. That's another significant piece of good news, because right now they are very dependent on Iran and getting oil out of Iran. If they get that oil from the U.S., good for them. The Bloomberg reported that China has renewed import permits for hundreds of U.S.-based beef processing facilities after the Chinese government let them expire last year in the middle of the U.S.-China trade war, which is a war that seems to have resolved into much more cooperative relationship. Chinese state-run media reported that Xi warned the U.S. to handle the Taiwan issue with utmost caution, which he said could lead the Taiwan issue to clashes and even conflicts between the two great powers if not handled properly. And what does that mean? Well, what it means is this flat-out declaration that was true during the Biden administration, where he was asked, would we come to the defense of Taiwan if it was attacked? And nobody else is going to be attacking Taiwan other than China. And the answer of previous presidents has been unquestionably, we are allies with Taiwan, and we will not allow it to be attacked while we stand by and allow that flourishing and very successful and democratically oriented pro-American nation, allow that nation to be destroyed or shattered. But who knows? Meanwhile, there is more good news that Trump is bringing home. Trump said on today that China had agreed to order 200 new Boeing jets potentially lifting the fortunes of the American jet manufacturer in one of the world's largest aviation markets. But Beijing officials were non-committal, even though Trump said it's a deal. Aboard Air Force One on his way home from Beijing following 2 days of talks with Xi Jinping, China's top leader, Mr. Trump said that a large order would be placed for Boeing planes and General Electric engines, and an even larger aircraft order might follow. It's approximately 450 engines, 200 planes, and a promise of up to 750 if they do a good job. Mr. Trump talking there about Boeing, I think. He was speaking to reporters on his plane on the way home, but the Chinese side has not made any announcements regarding whether or not it has actually agreed to purchase the aircraft or the engines. And then there is more about the ramifications of other decisions made by our administration. And Dateline Warsaw, this is in Politico, Poland, one of America's closest allies in all of Europe, was reportedly blindsided by this week's surprise decision by Pentagon Chief Pete Hegseth to cancel the planned deployment of 4,000 American troops to the country. The government is now scrambling to respond while insisting that the move doesn't undermine Poland's security. The Polish-American alliance is durable and lasting, said Defense Minister Władysław Kosiniak-Kamysz. That's what the Minister of Defense for Poland said today. Poland continues to be the most stable American ally in Europe. And Poland, one of those former communist countries that has been doing extraordinarily well and has become a very important ally of the United States. Meanwhile, the New York Times and the Washington Post are both reporting, and it's being picked up around the world, that the Trump administration's public portrayal of a shattered Iranian military is sharply at odds with what U.S. intelligence agencies are telling policymakers behind closed doors. That's reported in the New York Times. This is according to classified assessments from early this month that show that Iran has regained access to most of its missile sites, launchers, and underground facilities. There's some indication by unidentified spokesman for the Trump administration that the administration is angry that the New York Times ran with these stories that are supposed to be classified. Most alarming to some senior officials is evidence that Iran has restored operational access to 30 of the 33 missile sites it maintains along the Strait of Hormuz. And that could threaten American warships and oil tankers transiting the narrow waterway. People with knowledge of the assessments, again unidentified, said they show to varying degrees, depending on the level of damage incurred at the different sites, that the Iranians can use mobile launchers that are inside the sites to move missiles to other locations. There's more on not underestimating Iran's capacities. We will get to that and more coming up on the Medved Show. And people who are looking at the situation in Iran and trying to figure out where we stand in terms of the pursuit of peace, the pursuit at least of an end to this war, the basic question today is, which side do you believe? The New York Times has a headline that says U.S. intelligence shows Iran retains substantial missile capabilities. And there's another headline from the Washington Post. CIA says Iran has 70% of pre-war missiles, can ride out blockade for months. That means using those missiles to continue to blockade, basically, American ships or American-sponsored ships of our allies. And there's even a third controversial revelation where a top U.S. commander dismisses reports of civilian deaths in Iran. And you could say, well, maybe that's good news, because it indicates that what Iran has been saying about mass casualties and civilian casualties in particular is not true. That's what Admiral Brad Cooper says in testimony before lawmakers on Capitol Hill. We will get to that, because all of this is extraordinarily important in terms of figuring out where we go, what we do to negotiate an end to this war, if that's even possible. The most alarming to some senior officials, the New York Times reports, is evidence that Iran has restored operational access to 30 of the 33 missile sites it maintains along the Strait of Hormuz, which could threaten American warships and oil tankers transiting the narrow waterway. First of all, isn't it stunning that they have 33 different missile sites? In other words, to actually reduce the Iranian capacity to strike back at us, which is something that President Trump and Pete Hegseth have said again and again and again they've done, that basically Iran is helpless right now. They had 33 missile sites, and they still have 30 of them that are operational. Operational access is what the report says. It's deeply alarming. This capacity of theirs has not been obliterated, which was the term that President Trump used last time after we attacked Iran last June in Operation Midnight. It was Midnight Strike or something of that nature, not the Fury operation. People with knowledge of the assessments said that they show, according to the New York Times, to varying degrees, depending on the level of damage incurred at the different sites, that the Iranians can use mobile launchers that are inside the sites to move missiles to other locations. In some cases, they can launch missiles directly from launch pads that are part of the facilities. Only 3 of the missile sites along the strait remain totally inaccessible, according to the assessments. Iran still fields about 70% of its mobile launchers across the country and has retained roughly 70% of its pre-war missile stockpile, according to the assessments. That stockpile encompasses both ballistic missiles, which can target other nations in the region, and a smaller supply of cruise missiles, which can be used against shorter range targets on land or at sea. So could it be that the agreement that President Trump just talked about with China, that they're not going to provide any more weaponry, they're not going to provide any more rockets or missiles or launchers or anything of that kind to Iran, that commitment may be because Iran doesn't need it, because they're still powerfully equipped without the Chinese materiel. The piece in the Washington Post makes clear that Iran can withstand U.S. naval blockade against it for 3 or 4 more months before facing severe economic hardship. The CIA told the Trump administration, according to a report by the Washington Post yesterday, The report also said CIA has found that Tehran retains significant ballistic missile capabilities after weeks of U.S. bombardment. The CIA report flies in the face of public statements by the Trump administration, which has claimed that the vast majority of Iran's drone and missile capabilities have been destroyed. The Washington Post cited a U.S. official saying that Iran has 75% of its pre-war inventories of mobile launchers and about 70% of its pre-war stockpiles of missiles. Iran has also managed to reopen the underground missile storage facilities. Their missiles are mostly decimated. They have probably 19%, but not a lot by comparison to what they had. That's what Trump said in the Oval Office on Wednesday. And now comes this alleged CIA report that contradicts the president very directly. Trump said that with his top advisors, they have insisted for weeks that Iran has been destroyed by U.S. and Israeli strikes, despite the Islamic Republic demonstrating its command and control is intact, and it can still conduct attacks at will. Operation Epic Fury decimated Iran's military and rendered it combat ineffective for years to come, said Secretary of War Pete Hegseth in early April. Just this week, however, Iran unleashed more than a dozen missiles and drones on the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, in retaliation against the U.S. trying to send a warship through the Strait of Hormuz. Iran also said it hit a U.S. warship, although the White House denied the claim. The U.S. has said that Iran is running out of storage for its oil, and that the buildup of oil could collapse its its energy infrastructure. Where do we really stand? Who do we believe on this? We'll be speaking with Peter Baker, a top White House reporter for the New York Times, coming up on the Medved Show. It's a distinct honor to welcome back to the show the chief White House correspondent for the New York Times, Peter Baker. And he is also the co-author of the book, The Divider, Trump in the White House, 2017 to 2021, the book about Trump's first term. Okay, Trump's second term has just hit a point today, where today and yesterday there have been posts in the New York Times, your newspaper, and the Washington Post, and elsewhere, suggesting that Iran is not destroyed, its power has not been obliterated or erased. Crushed was a term that Olivia Wiles of the White House used today, saying that Iran has been totally crushed. Not so fast. Apparently, of their major missile bases along the Strait of Hormuz, 33 of them, 30 are still operational. So who do you believe in a case like this, especially with President Trump accusing your newspaper very directly of falsifying the record of his glorious military victory?
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I'm glad to be back. And it's an important question. I totally agree with you. I'm glad you're talking about it, because this information is not something that the newspapers are making up. We're getting this from the government. We're getting this from U.S. intelligence assessments, the same assessments that presumably are going to the president. And you're right. They're saying that the Iranians obviously have been damaged. I mean, there's been something like 13,000 strikes or something like that. So clearly there are quite a lot of setbacks for the Iranians. Their navy is, in fact, largely sunk, as the president likes to say. But that doesn't mean that they're done. It doesn't mean that they're without any capability. Our reporting shows, as you said, that they still have access to these missile sites along the Strait of Hormuz, that roughly 70% of their missile launchers overall. 70% of their ballistic missiles have not been destroyed by this military campaign. And there's been another report I saw that said that even their nuclear program still roughly about a year away from getting a nuclear weapon, which is about where they were before all this started. So yes, obviously damage has been inflicted, but it may not have changed the overall calculus at the moment.
There was an interchange on the plane today coming home from China between the President of the United States and David Sanger, who is a very distinguished reporter on national security and foreign affairs for your newspaper, for the New York Times. Let me play you part of what President Trump had to say to Mr. Sanger.
Clip
He
did not get the political changes in Iran. I had a total military victory. But the fake news, guys like you write incorrectly. You're a fake guy. Guys like you write about incorrectly. We had a total military victory. We knocked out their entire Navy. We knocked out their entire Air Force. We knocked out all of their anti-aircraft weaponry. We knocked out all of their radar. We knocked out all of their leaders, number one, and then we knocked out all of their leaders in the 2nd Division, and we knocked out numerous of their leaders in the 3rd Division, and they're very confused. We've had a total victory, except like people like you that don't write the truth. You know, you should write. I actually think it's sort of some treasonous what you write, but you and the New York Times and CNN, I would say, are the worst.
A quick response on that, Peter Baker?
Well, first of all, I'd point out that David Sanger has been writing about national security long before Donald Trump ever showed up on the political scene. He knows more about Iran, knows more about national security than almost anybody I know. And I trust anything he has to say, and for good reason, because he's had a long track record of being right. Here we've got a president who's saying some of the things he's saying are true. That doesn't mean that what we've reported is also not true, because two things can be true at the same time, right? You can, in fact, dominate the skies above Iran, which largely we do, the United States does. At the same time, not have necessarily destroyed all of their ballistic missiles, not necessarily have eliminated or wiped out or obliterated the entirety of their nuclear program. And again, the information that David is reporting is coming from U.S. government, coming from intelligence assessments, not from, his own personal opinion. So, the president can believe what he wants. He can say what he wants. We're going to continue to report what the facts show.
Okay, given the fact that the American people overwhelmingly want a way out of the war in Iran, what is the right viable way out? To negotiate our way out, to bomb our way out, or basically just to forget about the whole issue of Iran, which would be hard to do right now? Where do we go?
Yeah, it's a great question. And that's why the question of Iran's their military capacity is so important, right? What constitutes a victory in this war? At the moment, the president's in kind of a box, because we're not having an all-out, military strikes at this point in this war, although there are some back and forth, relatively smaller engagements. And he's trying to negotiate an end. Well, the Iranians don't seem to think that they've lost, and they seem to think that they can wait him out. They seem to understand that he has bad poll numbers, that we're heading toward a midterm. The economy is unsettled here at home. People are unhappy about the war. They never supported it in the first place, according to polls. And they don't seem to feel like they need to make the kind of concessions that Trump would need in order to say this is an unvarnished victory. So how do you get to an agreement that both sides can live with? At the moment, it's hard to see what that looks like.
And obviously that the proposal, the 14-point proposal, and other proposals haven't been working particularly well. In terms of the future of the fight in Ukraine, there's reason to be encouraged, isn't there, by some of the Ukrainian success recently?
Well, it's certainly the case that the Russians have not been making much progress on the battlefield. If you look at what they have been doing in 2026, it's really been microscopic compared to anything that matters. They would have to go for years and years and years simply to take over all of the Donbass, the eastern region that they really want, if they continued at this pace. The Ukrainians have shown that they have adapted to this war. They have learned how to use drone warfare, and they have managed to use it very effectively, even against a larger, more powerful invader is really striking. Now, what does that mean for Vladimir Putin's calculations? Hard to know. He's the only guy who really has a say when it comes to Russia, and he's not being very open about it. At some point, the question is, does he recognize that it's not winnable on the battlefield and make a genuinely, acceptable deal to the Ukrainians, or is he going to continue to hold out for everything he wants, a maximalist point of view that the Ukrainians can't accept?
Basically, will we be able to reconcile some of the divisions that have been difficult for our NATO allies? Does NATO have a solid future?
Yeah, NATO is in trouble. NATO without the United States is a very different beast. And right now, our NATO allies look at the United States and think that they can't rely on Washington. They can't rely on this administration the way they have every other administration since World War II of both parties. And so that means for the next couple of years, at least, Europe is going to be looking at how to go it alone and what they can do on their own.
Peter Baker, appreciate your perspective always. And it's a pleasure having you on the show. We have coming up a news alert. A judge declared a mistrial in the Harvey Weinstein's rape retrial after the jury is unable to reach a verdict. We will bring you the latest on that issue and that development and more about the claim that the U.S. has imposed literally no civilian casualties on the people of Iran. That's what our top admiral in the operation says. We will get to that and more coming up on the Medved Show.
Entertain your brain.
Just sit back and enjoy the show.
Every day on the Michael Medved Show.
And the news from CNN is that Harvey Weinstein's rape retrial has ended, and it ended in a mistrial, what people sometimes call a hung jury. That happened today after the jury deadlocked in the closely watched #MeToo era case that another jury failed to decide last year. Will they go for 3? I somehow doubt it. While the former Hollywood mogul has been convicted of other sex crimes on 2 U.S. coasts and remains behind bars, the mistrial leaves the New York rape charge in limbo after 3 trials so far. Again, Harvey Weinstein has clearly paid a price. His health is bad. He has appeared in the courtroom in wheelchairs, and he is not an example of cinematic greatness or anything of the kind. Just a shameful abuse of the power that he had attained in the movie business. Meanwhile, speaking of abuse of power and confusion and disagreement about where we stand, the president had a successful, it would appear, visit to China and negotiation with Xi Jinping. On the way home on Air Force One, the president got a question from a reporter about whether he spoke to the Chinese leader concerning the cyber attacks that have been performed by the United States against the communist Chinese. This is question 14.
Did you talk to him about the cyber attacks that he's done in the United States or the MSS? I did, and he talked about attacks that we did in China. You know, what they do, we do too. It's like the spying. They're talking about, the spying. I said, well, the spying? We do it too. The infrastructure. Look, no, I'm talking about spying. The question was asked to me yesterday, I guess, what about the fact that China's spying in the United States? I said, well, it's one of those things because we spy like hell on them too.
Then the big question, the question that would appear to be the major concern of Xi Jinping, is whether the United States is going to be judicious about Taiwan. And there is a fear on the part of the Chinese that we will provide weapons and military support for Taiwan and would rush to their defense if they are attacked at some point by China, which believes that Taiwan is rightfully a part of their country. Trump was asked about defending Taiwan. Here was his response on the plane. This is clip 7.
I want to say, I'm not going to say that. There's only one person that knows that. You know who it is? Me. I'm the only person. That question was asked to me today by President Xi. I said, I don't talk about that. He asked you today. Well, he asked you if you would send troops. He asked me if I defend them. I said, I don't talk about that.
He talking about defending Taiwan and saying, only I know the answer. I'm not sure that's something that will reassure the Taiwanese. It's a crucial question of U.S. policy. And then there was another question indicating that President Trump may have changed his position on China to a much more favorable cooperative position that he hopes can be maintained and achieved with his buddy, Xi Jinping. Speaking to another buddy, to Sean Hannity, on the way home, the president spoke about having China purchase big tracts of U.S. farmland. And Trump seems to have changed his position, saying it's a good thing. Listen, this is clip 5.
The issue of Chinese students in our universities, more importantly in my mind, is that Chinese nationals have been buying up thousands and thousands of acres of farmland, ranch land, and land near military installations. Now, I would assume I'm in Beijing. If I wanted to buy property near one of their military installations, I don't think President Xi...
No, they wouldn't let you. I don't... Look, it's not that I love it. Do you want to see farm prices drop? You want to see farmers lose a lot of money? Just take that out of the market. But they've had a lot of land for a long time. Obama did nothing about it. They bought a lot of it during the Obama administration. He did nothing about it.
Okay, but is Trump implying that he will do anything about it? A prominent conservative commentator on X responded to this comment by the president, writing, again, for the umpteenth time, if you're going to make the argument that we must do stuff to beat China, like tariffs and infinity data centers, people are going to doubt your sincerity when you turn around and promote selling them farmland, AI chips, and educating their elite. President Trump also indicated, and I think he's right about that the idea of educating Chinese people at our top universities, and I'm not now talking of just about Chinese Americans, though obviously they're very, very prominent in our universities, but visiting Chinese students. What's interesting about that is many of them end up choosing to become American. By the way, yes, despite what President Trump indicated there in that exchange with Sean Hannity, Americans can buy property in China, but they cannot own land directly. All land in China is owned by the government, by the state. Foreigners can purchase residential property, apartments or houses for personal use, which includes a long-term land use lease, typically for 70 years. In terms of standing with Taiwan, that has been a long-time U.S. policy, actually. In July 1982, the Reagan administration provided 6 assurances to Taiwan to counterbalance the limitations on arms sales agreed to in the third U.S.-China communique, ensuring continued support for Taiwan. Those principles, delivered orally by James Lilly, assured Taiwan, Taipei, their capital, that the U.S. would not set an end date for arms sales or pressure them to recognize Chinese sovereignty over Taiwan. So when President Trump says only he knows American policy regarding defending Taiwan, it's a little bit distorting what has been American policy for some 40 years, more than 40 years. American policy to nurture and sustain the alliance with Taiwan. There is more about the questions of what has really happened in Iran. And the admiral who is in charge of the whole operation in that part of the world, Admiral Brad Cooper, told lawmakers, senators and congressmen today that his staff had been proactive in trying to prevent civilian deaths, and our staff specifically warned the Iranian people more than 100 times about the threat of them being used as human shields. But the senior officer overseeing U.S. combat operations in Iran told senators on yesterday, that the destruction of an Iranian school, which the Iranians authorities say killed 175 people, may have been caused by a U.S. bomb, but it's the only casualties we've inflicted on Iranian civilians. Is that true or believable? We will get to that and to more coming up in this greatest nation on God's green earth.